Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be discussing CBBC, and specifically the idea, the faint glimmering hope. We asked the question of, has CBBC actually been saved? Now, you might be thinking, whoa, hang on, Adam, you've been saying for weeks, for months, nigh on years now, that CBBC is going to be taken off traditional TV and to be moved online. And that is more than likely still to happen. However, something came up recently that made me question, well, maybe there's a very faint hope. What I'm talking about is the BBC's annual plan. Now, this statement comes out every year. It's published. It's a beefy document. This year's one was 96 pages long. It made for some very interesting reading. And if you want to read it yourself, I'd highly recommend it. It's easily found on the BBC's website. However, when you look at it, at RxTV Info, which we always recommend here, they pointed out there's no channel closures yet. It says that in 2022, the BBC announced plans to axe BBC4 and CBBC's current broadcast channels. Their content would go online only. The BBC annual plan for 2024-25 makes no further mention of this. Last year, some media outlets reported that the BBC was U-turning on the plans. Arguably, all BBC services will eventually become online only. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because when they announced this, and we covered it back in 2022, when it was announced that CBBC was going to be moving to online only, it was stated that this would happen at the earliest of 2025. You know, they said that it would be on the air for 3 more years at the very least. So in this plan that's forecasting the next financial year, so 2024, and the first few months of 2025, to have not even a mention of channel closures, not just CBBC as well, but BBC4, to not even mention it, seems really odd. Now, don't get your hopes up too quickly. There could be a number of reasons for this. As I say, the financial year goes up until early April 2025, so it could just be that the channel closures might be planned for later in the year in 2025, or they could be postponed till even later on, even say till the end of the Royal Charter period, which would be the end of 2027. Of course, none of this has any direct evidence. This is just me speculating. But again, I do find that odd that even if they're not planning on closing it within the next 12 months, the fact that there's not even a mention, not even a, oh yeah, you know, we announced this and we're still planning on doing that, whether that's in the near future, the far future, not even a mention seems quite staggering. What was mentioned, of course, was the huge shift to moving things digitally, to moving things onto the iPlayer, stressing that that's how people consume their programs nowadays, which is absolutely true. We've talked about that ad nauseum. So I think, you know, it still is likely to happen. I find it interesting that RxTV say arguably all BBC services will eventually become online only. And yeah, that is, you know, that is likely to happen. But I mean, all of them, even including BBC One as the flagship, I think they'll have to do a bit of wrangling with Ofcom before they even try that. And I wanted to go back and just double check what that original post said regarding CBBC. And when you look at it from the article dated the 26th of May 2022, it does say the change isn't set to happen for at least another 3 years. So at least, again, that's where the 2025 date supposedly comes from. And it also mentions, lest we forget, that the CBBC channel won't be affected and will stay on TV and on the iPlayer. And I think that was ultimately the right move. You know, if you said between CBBC and CBeebies, which one would you keep on the traditional television airwaves? I think CBeebies is ultimately the right call, because I think for the target demographic it goes for, it's much more important that they have programming and content that's readily accessible without an internet connection. And yes, I know they're saying television's going that way anyway. You know, the push for Freely coming out in a few months and the push to internet IP streaming, that maybe, you know, free view, the traditional way of watching television, might die out. But as long as it exists, I'd argue it remains the most accessible form of watching television as opposed to the internet. And that's further backed up by this. Whilst I was digging, I found an article here from felixonline.co.uk. It was posted about a month after the announcement of the CBBC move online. And the key bit that I found interesting here, aside from the little swipe at Nadine Dorries, I mean, possibly the least cultured culture secretary we've ever had. Correct.
Particularly when it's a receipt of taxpayers' money.
It's not in receipt of licence fee money. It makes its money from commercial operations.
Yeah.
But it goes on to cite this. It says, you might say, why does it matter whether it's online or not? Most kids are online these days and frequently accessing YouTube and streaming services. And you're probably right. The pandemic, though, recently brought into focus our increasing reliance on digital services and highlighted the number of families who struggle to access them. A 2019 report from the Office for National Statistics on the UK's digital divide showed that only 51% of families with a household income between £6,000 and £10,000 had access to the internet. Clearly, such families might also struggle to pay the TV licence fee of £159, which it was then in 2022, although at £13.25 a month, it still comes in below the average monthly broadband cost of £30.30, which is according to glide.co.uk. And yes, I know the licence fee is going up very soon to £169.50, which puts the average monthly cost at just over £14. But I'll tell you what, even in the last 2 years, I bet you that average broadband cost has either remained the same at around £30 or has even gone up. And that's an angle that I think we don't really acknowledge much. You know, I can already see the comments, you're defending the licence fee. It's not necessarily a defence, I'm just pointing out the sheer numbers that this article points out as well. The licence fee is a hefty cost for sure. And £13.25 a month, though, back then, and even just over £14 in a few days, it's cheaper than internet. And yes, I know the immediate rebuttal, we need the internet a lot more than we need live television in the traditional way. And I'd argue that's correct. You know, we need the internet for our jobs these days, especially if we're working from home. But I think that, the cost of it there is still, and again, particularly for low income households, as it says there, between £6,000 and £10,000, depending on everyone's situation, it depends on what's more important. Again, it says out of those households that earn between 6 and 10k, 51% of them, this is obviously back in 2019, but 51% of them had access to internet. Now, that was 5 years ago, admittedly. I'd like to think that in the last 5 years, that statistic's gone up. I'm not sure if the office has done a new survey explaining this. But even if it has gone up, for as much as the internet is key, you'd argue that we should have access to internet for 100% of families, not just the 51% or even say 60 or 65%. It should be accessible to everyone. The other argument it makes is there's also the consideration that kids might be safer watching a controlled television channel rather than subjected to the various content risks on the internet. I'm a bit divided on this one because yes, watching via a controlled channel, as it puts it, you're regulated to the schedule, to what's on the schedule. Obviously, when I was growing up, we had no choice in the matter. The internet was around, but it wasn't strong enough to, stream programs. Certainly, YouTube wasn't a thing, etc. So we were very much not given that choice, whereas the children today have that choice. And I'm a big believer of they should have the choice on what content they want to consume. Yes, I know sites, including YouTube and other sites as well, there's a lot less safeguarding done there. The content they can find can be a lot more unsuitable and inappropriate a vast majority of times. But then I think if you lock it to just the controlled television channels now, whilst the choice exists, is that, are we restricting the choice they have? It's a point of contention that will probably go back and forth for as long as all these safeguarding issues on the internet exist, which, let's face it, it's probably going to be forever. It takes some time to big up the programs as well, saying they've often offered a lot of educational value as well as entertainment. Classics like Newsround, they're brilliant at introducing children to watching and engaging with the news in the wider world. I'll agree with that there because I myself used to watch Newsround when I was a kid, and that was my introduction to, news programming. How are news programs presented? How do you get the news across to people? So I'd argue it's invaluable. Then there's Deadly 60, a personal favourite, and everybody remembers Horrible Histories, without which I think we'd all struggle to name every one of Henry VIII's wives and much more besides. I'll agree with you there. Ironically, I think I studied the Tudors before Horrible Histories hit TV, but I'll tell you what, after seeing it and hearing the song and all that, I ain't gonna forget those wives again. But all this, again, just makes me think, well, have the BBC indeed U-turned on this policy? Again, all I'm saying here is just a theory. I've got no inside sources. I don't have any confirmation. But my inkling now is maybe the shift to online for CBBC isn't coming as soon as we thought. Originally, when they announced this, I would have thought the BB would want to get a move on with it. They've been trying to push for like digital this, digital that, online only, online first, etc. So why not CBBC follow that mold? So I projected that, hey, by the spring of 2025, which is now only a year away, that this could happen. But with no mention in the annual plan, which covers up to spring 2025, it makes me think, okay, well, maybe now it's going to be late 2025 at the earliest, or maybe it might be pushed back further into 2026, or as I say, at the end of the Royal Charter period, which falls at the end of 2027. It's all speculation, but I don't know whether it's the backlash from people or like rethinking it amongst the corporation. It just makes me think that this initial choice to get it online ASAP might have now shifted. And it's quite funny, really, because even if it goes online, I'd like to think, I'd hope that somewhere in the BBC 1 and 2 or 2 schedules, they'd find time to put a block of children's programming under CBBC. Basically, we're going full circle, doing what we used to do. Even though the CBBC channel existed from 2002, its sole channel, before that, for 17 years, it was airing on BBC 1 or BBC 2. From 1985, children's BBC was a block of programming where they'd air, kids' content, a lot of it home stuff made here in the UK, stuff made by the BBC, stuff made by independent companies, and then eventually imports and the like. But this model, for nearly half of CBBC's current life, that was it. It didn't have its own dedicated channel. It got a few hours on the schedules of BBC 1 or BBC 2. Now, since the CBBC channel, obviously now that's got a life, that grew a life of its own over the last 20 years. And with that going, if there's no traditional presence anywhere, I think that'd be a little bit sad. Yes, a lot of kids do access content online first as opposed to traditional, but I think it's still good to have the option, again, for those who don't have access, say, to the best internet or internet generally, as there's still many families who don't have access. And again, having that traditional option, I think, is going to be vital for a few more years to come. And even if, I just think having that programming block, even if it's just like 2-3 hours, BBC 2, BBC 1, whatever, just keep it on TV for as long as it can, I think. On traditional, have a space on traditional as long as it can. I think it's important that there is some kids' TV available on traditional television and it's not all locked behind, having access to the internet. But those are just my thoughts on the situation. Again, this is not confirmation that they definitely have been saved from moving online. I still very much think that's going to happen. If anything, the annual plan, whilst it doesn't mention CBBC, it certainly gets across that idea that they are driving for this. They are driving to move fully digital, to accustom to the modern way people watch television, amongst all the other things going on. But again, I do think CBBC might have a little glimmer that it either might have more time on traditional TV than it thinks, or there might be some hope for it to remain on traditional in the future, albeit amalgamated into one of the BBC's main channels. But again, that's all just theory on my part. We shall see. But what do you think about this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think CBBC should just go online only, have no presence on traditional telly at all? Do you think it should have a reduced presence? Anything like that, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it. It does really help us out. And subscribe to us as well. We'd love to have you aboard here with us. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to all our patrons for supporting the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Bruce Danton, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, Trev Hughes, AJ Mac 200017, Deck KP20, Simon Harrison, Evan Hart 38, Jen, and Ted Elliott, our AMTV staff members.